August the 26th, 2023. Guys, the weekend's here. We're going to go into a cooling phase in the next few days here. It's a little cooler after the rain yesterday we got. Today, though, it's going to heat right back up. We're looking at about 105 for the actual temperature in central Mississippi today. And then you're going to be very close to up into the 120s for the real feel, and higher than that in the heat indices. But what we're looking at is an AccuWeather map of the storm we're watching come into the Gulf of Mexico now. It is centered a little different than what we're seeing on this map. It actually is going to shoot the gap between Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula, which means it won't go through quite as much weakening phase. It may be just barely touching the edge there, but this is a little bit off. They're saying the timing on this 8 a.m. Sunday, 8 a.m. August the 26th, 2023. Guys, I hope everyone's getting ready for a nice weekend. We're going to have some cooling temperatures moving through tomorrow and into Monday. And we got a little cool weather after that rain yesterday. Remember I mentioned it went from 104, the actual temperature, to 84 after that cool rain. It wasn't anything flooding or anything, but that alone helped a lot, guys. It was very dry. Again, it wasn't enough to really change the drought situation here, but it definitely cooled it off. Now, you're looking at a tropical map from AccuWeather. We're going to look at the normal ones, but this one's got some very good timing markers on it. Let me say this. It's showing the storm here, and this is Saturday morning. Then it says Sunday is going to be here, then Monday there. But we're going to look at satellite images. This thing's already in the gap between Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula. It's not ashore. It's setting in the gap, getting ready to tear out of there. Now, something interesting here. It's saying by 8 a.m. Wednesday, we're going to have a Category 1 coming in to the Florida Panhandle. Now, this is a little bit to the right, the movement from the last video. Remember, it was centered around the Apalachicola area as far as the center of the cone. And we talked about when it got closer to shore, they will have a tendency to move right. And that's what we're seeing here. Now, it will change between now and 8 a.m. Wednesday. Guys, I'm really concerned that this map is a day or so behind the actual timing on this. But again, even the models are showing this movement to the right. But a Category 1 hurricane now. Coming in at 8 a.m. Wednesday right into this area. It's moving a little bit further to the east and south as far as where it's coming ashore. Now, let's go from AccuWeather to the National Hurricane Center's tracking down in Miami, Florida. Notice where the red X is here. It's a 90% chance of development over 7 days, but it's not going to last 7 more days. Notice it is not ashore on the Yucatan as they're indicating now. It is in the gap, and it's going to be moving north and slightly northeast. And so that's why I'm thinking that timing on the AccuWeather is a little off. But do notice that the center of this predicted path is a little further to the right. We'll look at the spaghetti models too. Now, Franklin, this thing is going to become a Category 3 now. And then it went from becoming a Category 1 to a Category 2, now a Category 3. Will the same thing happen with the potential Category 1 here coming into the Gulf? We don't know. But these storms, not too worried about. But we do have a new one moving off the African coast that has a 20% chance of development. But right now, let's focus on these two because they're the closest to the gate that we watch. Says the northwestern Caribbean Sea and eastern Gulf of Mexico. This is disturbance number 93. It says shower and thunderstorm activity continues to show signs of organization in association with an area of low pressure located near the Yucatan Channel. Environmental conditions appear conducive for further development of the system, and a tropical depression is likely to form within the next day or two while it moves generally northward over the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. Now it continues. It said interest in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico or western Cuba and Florida should monitor the progress of the storm. You know, guys, that we're all going to be doing that. Let's take a look at Franklin. Now, it's basically on the same tracking that we saw yesterday, moving between Bermuda and the Atlantic seaboard here. But notice this M right here, that means we're into a Cat 3, a major hurricane. It'll remain an H through a Cat 1 and a Cat 2, but when it gets to M, you're at 3 and or higher. So you're at a Cat 3 at the most dangerous place it could be for our friends in Bermuda. Right here, you're going to be on the bad side of the storm as it makes this turn. So make sure you're preparing for for everything you can do to buckle everything down, and possibly if you can get over to the U.S. or something would be a good idea. But that dangerous position will be at 2 a.m. Tuesday. Check this out. 2 p.m. Monday, still a hurricane, but overnight changing to a Cat 3. So guys, this is nothing to play with. You know, I hope all shipping interests are aware of this and they don't try to make a move through this, trying to get a shipment out somewhere. But Cat 3 is nothing to play with. Right now, it's 65 miles an hour sustained, moving northeast at 6 miles an hour. Still, again, slightly on the track this way, but it's about to make that turn back to the northwest instead of northeast. Now, looking at the Gulf of Mexico satellite, guys, as the sun rises, you can see what I was talking about. Doesn't look like it's going to linger around the tip of the Yucatan very long, and we're already starting to see the tropical characteristics, the out-fanning of this thing. It's sensing this very hot water. You guys down in the Panhandle, you're getting a little bit of rain this morning, probably need it, but these storms are powerful in the sense that you can see this outflow right there. See that? So you got some energy building already in the front of where this hurricane is coming. And again, they're saying Cat 1. I would be surprised if it remained that, just looking at what it's doing right now. You're starting to see the rotation. See, as it fans out right here, these tail feeder bands, that's telling you that it's forming. Now, this update just came in at 9 a.m. Eastern. It's 43 minutes old. Now, what I'm seeing here is, again, this turn to the right. Our two main models are already crossing right here. Now, you've got Apalachicola here where the green line is. That's from the AVNO network. But even from this morning, just before this update, you could see a slight movement. But the purple line right here, which you can look, is the Navy model. And the light green one that's weaving through here and crossing the Navy model right as it comes ashore is the Canadian model that we watch a lot. Now, the extremes are south of Tampa and then back up to Apalachicola. So, guys, again, we talked about it yesterday, pinpointing right here, Apalachicola, and everything now is moving to the right. And remember the hard turn as it gets closer. Maybe they're calculating that in, I'm not sure. But then the Navy model throws this thing back out into the Atlantic with a downward turn. Canadian model continues out into the Atlantic behind Franklin. Remember, they were pulled together there in some of the models. But again, it looks like this area of Florida, you're definitely under the gun, and I would be surprised if this thing remains a Cat 1, the way that it's looking now, and not going to be tied up as they were thinking. See how the models are tied up here along the Yucatan? This thing's setting right out in the middle of it now and headed north. Now let's take a look at the Canadian model itself. You've got your wind vectors and your mean sea level pressure. Again, note this is today. Notice how far the orange area of high pressure is moved out of the Atlantic or moved north into the Atlantic. And this morning we're getting a little bit of break here, but as we speak it is 79 degrees real feel, 82 outside. We've got 84% humidity here again, central Mississippi this morning. So it's a little better, but we expected to get very hot today. But here is Franklin setting out here 65 miles per hour. Going to make that loop. You'll watch that. Then our system in the Gulf, which they're not even showing right now, but you'll see it rapidly develop, will trail it. Now, according to the Canadian model, remember, it's going to follow Franklin after it comes ashore and rakes the east coast. It's going to follow it out. But let's take a look at the model itself. Play it forward starting today. There's Franklin. It's going to miss Bermuda, but the wrong side of the storm will be there in this Cat 3 that's approaching you guys. Then you see this unnamed storm so far. Follow it. We'll stop this on the date. Now, one thing I want to say, this thing is showing it. Let me back it up. Drifting around on that northern tip of the Yucatan right there, guys. I don't know if that's going to happen. All the wind movement is the opposite direction, so we'll just have to see how this works out. But right now, it is not there. It is in between, and you saw that the forecast cone was moving north, so keep that in mind. But we'll step this through. We're on the 29th now. It's out into open water. Again, moving just a little bit further south and east than yesterday. But we expected that. Right there, the center of circulation is still offshore, but this is August the 30th. Notice your timestamp there. So today, 26, we got tomorrow's the 27th. So it would be around the Wednesday time. If it waits that long, we're going to have to watch it. It could pick up speed. And we do have wind pushing it in that direction, your upper level wind. But by the 30th, your outer bands are well ashore all the way up into the Georgia line right there. We'll go forward. It strengthens right before it comes ashore. You guys can see that area. So Tampa, and depending on the size of the storm, you would be on the bad side or the right side. That's because of the counterclockwise motion. We'll step it through the 30th. It's still ashore, coming out at the Florida-Georgia line and raking the coast. Still half of the storm out in the ocean, which will continue to give it some leverage as far as it won't tear it apart nearly as fast as it would if it was completely ashore. Moving forward, 30th, coming offshore there, 31st, starting to follow Franklin. Don't let it play on through right there. But notice there's something trying to form in the Gulf of Mexico here, even at that. We're getting into the peak of the season, but I think because of the delayed effect of not having any storms for so long through the early part of the summer, that it's just going to be very intense here at the end, trying to do the cooling thing that these storms do, pulling all the heat off the ocean and moving it into the upper atmosphere, which is much colder, and dropping it back down. That's the way nature works. But again, watch this right there. We're going to have to pay attention to it. They're not going to show much forming yet because it's so far out. But it is showing low pressure remaining in the Gulf. Now, looking at NavGem, the Navy model, it's pretty much same track, a little further south than yesterday, but it's strengthening more according to the Navy model. Right there, you're starting to see it intensify a little earlier. And let's just step it through. This is the 29th. Still gaining strength as far as the center of circulation. 30th, right there, strengthening as it reaches back into the Atlantic. The pressure's going down. Look at that, almost as strong as Franklin out here, guys. So we're probably looking at a Cat 2 at this point, and following Franklin out. But remember the Navy model had this thing come out and start to loop back down. We're just going to let it play all the way through one time. High pressure building back behind it over Georgia, parts of Florida, Carolinas. Right there, and that orange is building back. So there's going to be some heat coming in right behind it, more than likely. But again, we got that right turn, guys. Now, let's take a look at the European model, because they're all starting to come together at this point now. And when they start agreeing on where it's going to come ashore, that's the place you guys need to pay attention, anywhere in that area. But we'll let it play forward, or I'll step it through. Check this out. There's Franklin in your center right here between the Yucatan and Cuba again, moving very fast, strengthening, and pretty much the same path. Let's back it up just a little here where it comes ashore. Right there, moving very fast, very similar area, and we'll let it play forward. Notice the European model also catches that looping around right there. You see that? We have seen that happen before. Loop out and come back into Florida and get back into the Gulf. I don't know what this one's going to do, but it definitely shows that high pressure build back in and stop the northeast movement of this storm while it's trying to follow Franklin. Check that out. Now, guys, there's going to be some cooling in the northeast in the next few days, and it's going to put pressure on this area between the high pressure and the lower cooler air. And they're saying from here in Springfield, Memphis, Nashville, Huntsville, Knoxville, and Charlotte, you can have localized damaging wind gusts of 55 to 65 miles per hour. That's Saturday afternoon today into the evening, with AccuWeather Storm Max winds 75 miles per hour with flooding downpours. But if you're like me, bring it on if you'll cool it down some, Father. Now let's go into next week, guys. The west, or the southwest and south central west, are going to get under that high pressure dome. See how it's building up through Seattle and over Montana here and into Canada, and then dipping low here. That's what's going to bring the stormy weather next week as this sets in. But notice Minneapolis, Chicago, you guys in New York, Washington, cooler, and the humidity is going to be a lot less. So very fall-like. Weather from north of Miami up through Charlotte because of our system we're watching. A little cooler here and a little drier. Notice that the drier part is very critical, because when you bring that humidity down, you bring those heat indexes down. And that is very important to us, because it's been a hot and miserable summer. Now, I'll end it with this, but they're saying the tropical system may soon be on the doorstep of the Gulf Coast in an area that AccuWeather meteorologists. Now, I'll end it with this chart, guys, and get this thing uploaded. But this was from yesterday on the 25th. Notice that. They were showing the low pressure over the very tip of the Yucatan, but now it's in the center, so just keep that in mind. And they're saying the strengthening factors early next week. It strengthens and accelerates in speed. That's why Wednesday may be a little later date than what we expected. We could be seeing this come ashore sooner. But again, your surface waters are warm, and you got the wind shear is moving in this direction, and that's going to contribute to the hard right turn. Now, could this thing continue to move in further south into Florida? Sure, it can. Could it move back to the left? We've seen it happen. But right now, the trend is moving, again, to the east and south as far as the changes in the models. But, guys, we're watching this. There's a lot going on this weekend. We're going to keep you fully updated. It's a heads up. Be safe.